Tristan, the New Orleans Saints delivered what I like to call a bare-knuckle beatdown on the Dallas Cowboys. They just wiped the field with them, man. Derek Carr, Alvin Kamara, I mean, just every player in the Saints organization, even the Water Boys, they did great. They were all hydrated.
They had a big day.
Look, Olave fans, if you were worried, I don't think you need to be anymore. Now, granted, you've had 2 weeks of not having to air out the ball, especially in like garbage time, but you have a team that seems to be very well-rounded. They can play defense. If you hadn't caught on to that yet, they're pretty good at that, and they're terrific at offense. Who would have known week 2 we were talking about the Saints over all the teams in the NFL as being one of the most consistently great teams over the last 2 weeks? Question I have for you. Are the Saints a top contender in the NFC?
As of just right now, what we've seen put on the field for the teams, you have to say that. Absolutely. Now, we will talk about Dallas in this segment, so I don't want to get too ahead of myself. Is it possible, Dallas isn't what we thought from last week? Maybe there was some Dallas inflation, obviously, but they're still decent. What struck me so much in this game, Saints won it 44-19, and it was never close. They took off early out of the gate and were off and running. I am a little worried about, are the Saints going to be able to perform in dogfights? Because week 1 against the Panthers and now week 2 against the Cowboys, they have literally, you blink and in the second quarter, they're up 3 scores essentially, and they're off and running. How are they going to feel once they get down? Can they claw back? We'll have those questions answered. But as of now, what was the most striking thing to me about this game is the New Orleans Saints dominated the Dallas Cowboys in the trenches.
Yep.
Absolutely dominated them. They ran the ball at will. Alvin Kamara had 115 yards and 3 carries. Derek Carr had plenty of time. And on the opposite end, Dallas struggled. They struggled in pass protection. Both tackles gave up a lot of pressure, and they couldn't really get the run game going. Rico Dowdle, 30 yards. Ezekiel Elliott, 16 yards. They had 68 yards total rushing. They didn't look as bad watching it as the stats reflect, but Dallas just struggled mightily, and it ultimately came down to the offensive and defensive line of the Saints. They bullied the Dallas Cowboys, and I didn't think that was possible, man. I did not think it was possible.
Yeah, because you got some really big guys in Dallas. And look, when you look at the rushing yards, you mentioned it, 68 for Dallas, 190 for the New Orleans Saints total rushing yards. That wins you a football game.
Yeah.
And then also, if you look at red zone percentage, 4 out of 5 red zone attempts for the Saints, making about an 80% success rate in the red zone. The Cowboys made it to the red zone 3 times, converted 0 of those attempts. So when you have a 0% red zone completion, you probably don't win a football game. Unless, you're playing like the Giants and you're the Commanders or something. I don't know. It's something crazy off the wall like that. But when you got a team like Dallas that everybody probably overinflated, like you mentioned, preseason, and look, this defense, where we left off last year, we thought it would be probably a lot better in week 2 than it seems to be.
Well, hey, I picked Dallas to miss the playoffs, so I thought they would regress. I thought they would take a step back. I didn't think they would look like this against New Orleans, and they looked great last week against Cleveland.
And look, let's be honest, there's probably still a way that there's likely a way that we're going to see Dallas, make it into the playoffs, because they usually do. But is this a wake-up call for Dallas right now?
It better be. Okay? It better be. I just kind of don't know who they are, because you don't see them get just absolutely bullied like that. A lot of times when Dallas loses games like this, it's usually a ton of mistakes. They had some, like obviously before the half, Dak threw an interception. It was 28-13. Dak threw an interception. They were driving a little bit, but it was just outclassed. It looked like the rosters weren't competitive. You never had a feel for that game after a quarter and a half that Dallas could do anything. Even though they moved the ball a little bit, it wasn't like they were constantly punting. I mean, if you look at their drive chart, 13 plays, 14 plays, 4, 5, 7, 10, 9. So they weren't going 3 and out every time. They were converting a little bit, but just like you said, when they got in the red zone, they couldn't punch it in. And the biggest thing and the biggest shock, you mentioned it, was the Dallas defense. That was supposed to be what carried this team. They did not. They let Derek Carr looked like Patrick Mahomes out there.
Yeah, Micah Parsons looked non-existent.
Yeah, where was he? Where was anybody? They might as well have been playing backups. The Dallas secondary was exposed. So it's certainly a wake-up call for Dallas. Obviously, we're not going to write them off, sound the alarms. It's way too early. But the main thing coming away from this game is I just wonder, is their roster does their roster not match up against good teams, or
is it
did they just have a bad day? Was it execution, scheme, coaching, whatever? But if it looked like it did, where it was a roster mismatch, then that's not something you're going to fix. I don't know the answer.
Yeah, too early to panic, but early enough to say, hey, this is concerning, and we do need to take a look at this under the microscope starting tomorrow morning and figure out what's going on, if not the plane ride on the way home. One gentleman I want to point out real quick is Alvin Kamara. I mentioned him earlier. The guy went beast mode, okay? I mean, 20 carries, 115 yards, 3 touchdowns on the ground, then 2 of 3 in the air for another touchdown. Like, the guy went back to 2021, Kamara, and said, hey, do you mind meet me in 2024 and still showing us what we can do in New Orleans? Because I haven't seen this type of execution from Kamara since about 2021. He's been consistently good. Like, he's a guy, if you play fantasy, that you put him on your bench, or I'm sorry, you put him in your starting lineup and he gets you points every week.
But he took over the game today. Yeah.
To this level, it's been a while. Do you think that this is going to be a key piece in New Orleans offense the rest of the season, or do you think we see later on in week 6, 7 that the game's going to have to rely more on Carr than it does the rushing game?
So I think for them to be successful and for them to have these type of performances, it has to be like today. You cannot ask Derek Carr to drop back and throw it 40 times. Like, I don't know how.
So you got to get ahead early.
You got to get ahead early. And I mean, I was mainly impressed with the offensive line because I thought they were going to be a real problem this year. They looked good. I mean, they were carving up that Dallas defense. They were creating holes for Kamara. But as you said, that's a kind of a big point to me. They were ahead early and they got comfortable early. Now, it's not like they took their foot off the gas. They kept hammering it. But I would like to see what it would look like if they were up against a team and they went down 10. Can they climb back into it? Can they make second half adjustments? Because so far through 8 quarters, it's just been a smooth ride for them. But you to your first point, you have to keep Kamara the centerpiece of the offense.
They have scored 91 offensive points in 2 weeks. They have allowed 29 points by the other team in the last 2 weeks. Those are pretty good numbers when you look at them on paper.
I'm genuinely shocked.